Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Chris Jensen. I am the VP of Corporate Communications and also the lead investor relations contact for Relevant Gold. It's my pleasure to welcome you to this webinar. In a few minutes, I'll turn it over here to our CEO, Rob Bergmann, and our Chief Exploration Officer, Brian Lentz, as well as one of our esteemed board members, Dr. Peter Megaw. But before I do, I just wanted to cover a couple of quick housekeeping items. This is a live webinar that is being recorded, and we will potentially use that for later rebroadcast. So the only people who have access to their cameras and microphones right now are our panelists. If you have questions during the presentation, you can type them into the Q&A section down there, and then we will at the end moderate those and answer the questions that we have time to get to. Due to the length of the presentation, we may not have time to get to all of them live, but we will commit to following up with answers. So if you do provide your contact information, we can do that. And then lastly, I just wanted to acknowledge that there is a private placement financing round that is currently open for Relevant Gold. This presentation today is not a solicitation for investment into that fundraising round. In fact, this is an update on the company, what's been going on, and a look ahead at kind of what we're excited about in 2022. So if you have questions about that private placement round or anything that you see in today's presentation, please do reach out to me. My contact information is on my slide at the moment. It's investorrelations@relevantgoldcorp.com. There's also a final slide in the presentation that has my email and phone number on that as well. And so with that, I will turn it over to Rob.
All right. Well, thank you, Chris. Thanks for the introduction. I first and foremost just want to thank everybody for joining us today and for your interest in Relevant Gold Corp. We're excited to be here. We're excited to kind of give everybody an update on what we've been up to and what our plans are moving forward, and why we're so excited internally here at Relevant Gold. And I also want to thank Peter for joining us today, as well as the entire management group and board at Relevant. For all of their contributions continually. Sitting next to me here, as Chris said, is Brian Lentz, who is our Chief Exploration Officer. Brian and I, if you don't know us, we have been business partners and co-founders in a number of businesses throughout the industry in the natural resource sector. We've spent a lot of time over the years working with majors, juniors, and basically developing companies in the private sector, and have had a lot of success in doing so. And Relevant Gold Corp is kind of our next big gold play that we've been developing for years now, and we're really excited to bring it out into the public sphere a bit more and share a lot more about what we have going on. Interestingly enough, we started our careers by getting some early mentorship from Peter. He was the one who edited our first resumes before we ever had even tried to get consulting work in the industry, and since has been able to provide us a lot of good guidance over the years. So Peter, I thank you for joining us as well today, and I don't know if you had anything you wanted to touch on before we jump into the presentation itself.
Just that thank everybody for tuning in today, and Rob says I've helped him since they were putting their resumes together. I've known him since he was 9, and the overlap of minerals and geology, it's been a lot of fun to watch him come along. It's a lot of fun to watch him take part of the business model that we built that was so successful for Imdex Cascabel, build on that, improve it, hone it, and take it to the next level. I love both of their visions in terms of large scale, high grade district scale, or mega district or multi-district scale. That's the kind of exploration I like to do. I like to see done, not just find another stope, but find a new district. And that's delightful to be involved in this project. Been on the ground, seen the gold in the ground, seen the gold, seen the rocks. Very impressed by what they've put together. So it's a delight to be involved, and I'm sure you're going to enjoy the presentation.
Well, thank you, Peter. And I'm going to pull that up here. And then Chris, just confirmation you guys can see the presentation.
Yep.
All right. Awesome. Well, again, thanks for the introduction, Chris. Thanks for putting the webinar together today. Peter, thank you for that intro as well. And we will jump right in here to Relevant Gold Corp. First and foremost, we have a cautionary statement, as any good junior explorer should. Ultimately, this is a very high risk industry, very speculative industry, and some of the statements utilized throughout this presentation may be considered forward looking. And again, as Chris mentioned, this presentation in no way constitutes an offer to sell securities, and that is not our focus here today, just an information update. Now, the cautionary statement, I know it's something that should be quick, but I like to spend a little bit of time on it and just talk about the fact that we are in a very high risk speculative marketplace as a junior gold explorer, but we really at Relevant Gold has focused on mitigating as much of that early stage risk as we can as we gear up to really progress this project and this company through the discovery process. And I think you'll see as we go through the presentation how we've done that. Why should you be paying attention? Ultimately, we think we've got a very strong value proposition. We've got an incredible team with a lengthy record of value creation, and we're really focused on this concept of unlocking a potential mega district, specifically with Abitibi-like potential. And we'll get into that here as kind of the meat and potatoes of this presentation. Based on this new thesis we've been developing, we've established a very large land position, and we have multiple projects permitted with about a dozen drill targets to test right out the gate. Currently, we're very tightly held by management and insiders, so we've got a great capital structure. And we've also been able to identify abundant coarse visible gold at surface, as well as our rock chip assays from our various rock chip mapping and sampling programs, returning up to 5 and exceeding 5 ounces per ton. And all of this is being done in Wyoming, which recently in 2020 was bumped up to the #2 spot in the Fraser Institute's Policy Perception Index, ranking it as the second most favorable mining policies globally. And that's evidenced, I think, by the permits we have in hand as well already. So taking a look at our current share structure, again, we've got 33.3 roughly million shares outstanding, issued, and we've got 12.5 million warrants outstanding, fully diluted at that 45.8 million shares roughly. And again, we are very tightly held by management and insiders, everyone on the management, including the board, and a lot of friends and family that we brought in the earlier rounds. So again, we're really focused on unlocking a potential mega district. And what do we mean by that? Ultimately, the Abitibi is a proven world-class gold district. Most everyone on this webinar today probably understands the Abitibi is one of the most prolific gold regions in the world that's produced well over 230 million ounces of gold. Our new science has really indicated a strong connection of the Wyoming province to the Superior province in these Abitibi belts during the time of mineralization, roughly 2.65 billion years ago. And with that thesis in mind, we began doing extensive reconnaissance work and really began to prove up this model by putting our boots on the ground and testing these targets and developing the systematic exploration package. Ultimately, this is really exciting because it opens up Abitibi-like gold potential and potentially unexplored Abitibi gold belts throughout Wyoming. To us, we're principled in a lot of things, and one of those things is that minerals are the future. We ourselves as a next generation group focused on untapping the mineral resources needed to power the future. And in the gold space, we're really focused on this mega district concept of multi-million ounce orogenic shear hosted gold and silver deposits. We've been developing these projects through data and science, right? This has been a pure generative scientific approach, taking this thesis and chipping away over the years, and really doing that through our systematic exploration process and our new eyes on old rocks approach. And taking this approach, we've since generated 5 very large district scale projects, all of which have illustrated near surface high grade gold. And again, is in Wyoming, which is a great place to operate. In addition to that, we're built on a team that has an incredible background in exploration, permitting, environmental, and mining compliance throughout the United States. And we since have, again, teed up multiple projects for drilling with some high value targets to begin testing. Taking a look at our leadership, as we've introduced Peter, who a lot of you probably already know, Dr. Megaw and his background with co-founder of Imidex Cascabel and Mag Silver. Ron Parrott. Ron Parrott was one of the original founders of AUEX, and that had sold that deposit onto Newmont. And since Ron had led the discovery of a number of large-scale gold deposits throughout Nevada. In addition to that, we have Sarah Weber. Sarah is out of Vancouver, and Sarah is the CEO of C3 Alliance Corp. She has a really deep knowledge of these Canadian markets, in addition to her geologic background, but her focus with C3 Alliance Corp has been on communities, ESG, environmental, social, governance, compliance, and things of that nature. So she has a lot of experience and guidance in that as we continue to grow Relevant Gold. And then myself and Brian, as we had already introduced, we round out the board here. In addition to the board, we've got a great management team. Besides myself and Brian, we have Mahesh Leonaj as our CFO. Mahesh has a widespread experience in mineral exploration companies, publicly traded in the Canadian markets, and some experience beyond that into the global markets prior to being in Canada. Sam Siebenauer, our VP Corporate Development. Sam came from Newmont. He was in senior management roles there. Ultimately spent a lot of his career leading up to that in ore controlled geology. So he really understands not only what it takes to be considered a tier 1 asset that a major miner looks at and considers, but he has a keen understanding of how these things develop through time and how to maximize that value in production at an operating gold mine. And in addition to that, we have Chris Jensen, who you guys have all met as an introduction to this webinar. Chris is our VP of Corporate Communications and Investor Relations. He's got a very extensive background in PR, marketing, investor relations, journalism, and especially in government affairs, which has been critical for us as we continue to grow and try to shift overall perception around exploration and mining in the US. And to give you some perspective of our background, as I mentioned earlier, we've worked with a large number of majors, mid-tiers and juniors, but we've been trained in what these majors truly look for in a tier 1 deposit, what the data package should look like, all of the kind of the things it takes to build up to a tier 1 asset, and through that we've got that full spectrum of experience and knowledge to take these things through the discovery process and beyond. In addition to our management team, we've got a pretty incredible technical advisory team. I know some of them are on this call today. Dr. Dean Peterson, he is the chief geologist at Big Rock Exploration, which is a kind of elite North American consulting firm for the exploration industry. Brian and I co-founded that business years ago. And Dean is leading the technical components there as our chief geologist. And with Relevant Gold, he's had actually specific experience in doing his PhD in the Abitibi gold belts. And we'll get into that, the details around that a little bit more in the presentation. Dr. Kevin Chamberlain, he's a professor out of the University of Wyoming, and he's a real critical piece to our thesis. He's one of the published authors in the peer-reviewed literature that we have basically connected the dots in this literature and in this research that really has opened up this Abitibi-like potential in the Wyoming province. So again, his expertise is in that tectonic reconstruction, age dating, and things of that nature. Dr. Stephen Allard, he is a structural guru. He actually, was one of our professors in university and now works consulting with us, which is great. He's got a lot of experience in multiply deformed structural systems and specifically in orogenic shear-hosted structural systems. And last but certainly not least is Dr. Thomas Campbell. He is, surprisingly enough, a very brilliant man, evidenced by the fact that he is the co-author of the Encyclopedia of Minerals. But in addition to that, he spent the majority of his career working in orogenic gold systems for homestake mining as a senior exploration geologist there, and eventually went into Barrick, working at the Hemlo and the homestake mines. So has a very unique understanding of these types of systems, these types of ore mineralogy, and what we can expect out of these long term. So getting into some of the key foundational points of our company at Relevant Gold, we really focus on what we call district scale opportunities. Now, district scale is a term that's used very commonly in the industry, so we thought it was really important that we take the time to identify what do we mean by district scale, how as it pertains to exploring for gold deposits. And ultimately, we're focused on these orogenic shear hosted deposits. So we take a look at the largest deposits known of that kind, and we start to understand what are the footprints of the actual mineralized ore body. What is the footprint of the development of that project over time? And so how big of a project do you need to truly host and develop a district scale opportunity? And that's what we set out to acquire. And since we've acquired 5 of these large district scale properties, amassing over 42,000 acres of ground. Another foundational rule, again, this was taught to us by Peter very early in our careers, and really that's to be economic. A deposit must have a recovered value of 2 times the all-in operating costs. And the way we really do that in the gold space is we focus on grade. Grade is king. Typically with high grade, you have high margins and insulation to market fluctuations. And so specifically within the gold space, we're focused again on these orogenic style shear hosted deposits, which have ultimately been the second most identified gold deposits exceeding 10 million ounces on Earth. So again, these types of deposits are very large, very big systems with very scalable opportunities. Our exploration strategy is very straightforward in nature, very complex in action. We really generate these new district scale opportunities utilizing what we call a new eyes on old rocks approach. Then we put our boots on the ground to get down and do our technical reconnaissance for target validation and acquisition, and immediately pump those into our systematic exploration process so that we can develop high quality drill targets and move them through the drilling and exploration phases, ideally to make new big discoveries. So that's a little bit of background on the company, kind of who we are and the basis of our thinking. Now we're going to get into the thesis. So really the science behind why Wyoming and why we're so excited about the exploration work we are doing in Wyoming. Ultimately, as we've coined, a potential unexplored Abitibi gold belt. So why is this important? During the time of deformation and gold endowment in the Abitibi and here in Wyoming was at that 2.65 billion year mark, which was when these 2 provinces were actually still connected. So at 2.65 billion years, you had your Wyoming and your Superior, i.e. Abitibi provinces still connected. And then later tectonics moved them to where they sit today. So with that, we would expect to see Archean belts throughout Wyoming, which we do. And they have the same age relationships to the Abitibi. Now, all along these belts, they've been historically mined and prospected, but very little modern exploration and drilling has occurred. Now, if we're thinking we're in a large scale Abitibi orogenic like system, we'd also expect to see a lot of other types of deposits and mineralization throughout associated with this. And we do. We not only see the orogenic shear hosted low gold, we also see VMS, copper, base metal, uranium, a lot of these things associated with these deep-seated through-going suture zones, similar to what we would see in the Abitibi. In addition to that, we've been able through our exploration programs to prove very high grades at surface. As I mentioned before, some of our rock chip programs have exceeded 5 ounces per ton gold. And we've also seen now abundant coarse visible gold at surface, which is always exciting. In addition to that, we have a very streamlined permitting system here. As we had said before, Wyoming is a great place to operate. That's evidenced by the fact that we already have multiple projects permitted and ready to go. And in addition to that, it's a very mining-friendly jurisdiction. There's been a lot of historic mining and culture there. But another thing you got to keep in mind is Wyoming has been built on natural resource development, both in the mineral sector and the ranching sector, and their GDP has been heavily reliant on that for a very long time. So they're very welcoming to new explorers and new developers looking to find gold and develop a potential opportunity. So according to this Wyoming thesis now, again, we've generated these district scale opportunities at 5 projects now: the Lewiston, Golden Buffalo, SHIELD-CARISSA, Windy Flats, and Bradley Peak. Again, these projects are total now over 42,000 acres. Within that, we do have some patented ground, about 58 acres. And we've got a succession of drill targets ready to go and a pipeline of discovery opportunities to follow through our systematic exploration. In the last year, we've done a lot of work, both on the acquisition side as well as on the technical development side. So we've done everything on our systematic exploration in our flagship assets being the Lewiston and Golden Buffalo to really work up some high quality drill targets, put them into the permitting timeline spectrum and get those permits back so that we can now get out and get the truth machine out to test these things at depth. So we've done expansive detailed mapping and sampling programs, detailed structural mapping, early stage metallurgy and gold deportment studies, ground geophysics, soil surveys, you name it, and have ultimately mapped in multiple mineralized shear zones with varying strike lengths. And so we're really excited about the work we've accomplished and what is in front of us now. So with this Wyoming thesis, and this new thinking comes new opportunity. This is to give you some perspective. These are the authors that, our generative team is able to connect all these dots on and really put this concept together on the economic implications that it has for the Wyoming province. So at that 2.65 billion year mark, you had your Wyoming province connected to your Superior province. So this is your Superior province. And you can see in here, your through-going east-west Abitibi, Wawa type structures. And all of the yellow boxes in here are your major gold deposits. So your plus 1 million ounce deposits. And what we see in Wyoming is a very similar thing. We see these east-west through-going Archean belts. And so it opens up this massive opportunity that has potentially been overlooked in the past. And again, this isn't a scientific concept that we just came up with out of nowhere. This is actually something that we came up with out of standing on the shoulder of scientific giants in this case, and really taking what they taught us in their publications and understanding how that creates opportunity in the economic space. So at 2.1 billion years, you had your major tectonic rifting, ultimately separating these two provinces apart and rotating them to their present day state. So again, 2.1 billion years, you have your tectonic rifting, Wyoming province shifting to where it currently sits. So when we think about how do we approach these new opportunities and how do we think about it from the broadest scale first, taking that outside looking in approach. And really what we started to see was Wyoming started to check every box, everything from open and permittable land to navigable permitting landscapes, the right type of tectonic environment, the right type of rocks, these very large scale suture zones, all of the different types of mineral deposits, as I said, orogenic gold, BMS, copper, nickel, PGE, and there was historic mining across most of these belts, but no recent exploration. So again, for us, that made us really excited to get out and start scratching the surface. And that's exactly what we did. We put our boots on the ground to get out and start testing this model, building off of this Abitibi extension thesis. And really our initial reconnaissance work continued to confirm the Abitibi lode gold criteria as we developed our mapping and sampling programs on a broad scale across multiple areas of interest. And all of these areas of interest returned anomalous gold and pathfinders, really giving us the initial proof of concept that we needed, especially for Brian and I, who were funding this out the gate, to really go after this aggressively and begin to acquire a large land position. So fast forward to today, we've established two major camps. Our 5 projects are across these 2 camps, the South Pass Lewiston and the Bradley Peak. And again, this is actually the figure from the literature. So when you saw the depiction of the Wyoming connected to the Superior province in that green blob, this here, we've colored it green for reference, is actually from Chamberlain's 2006 publication. This is that Wyoming province. And you can see very obviously these east-west through-going suture zones across the state. And that's very similar to what we would expect if this was connected to the Abitibi at that time of structural deformation and mineralization. And ultimately giving us these east-west oriented suture zones, similar to what we'd see in the Abitibi, Wawa. And they're cross-cutting favorable host rocks. And all along that, we're seeing an abundance of historic gold mining throughout. And again, this is called the Oregon Trail Structural Belt here. So that's to give you that reference, the OTSB. That's what our major belt is along here. So zooming in, this is taking a look at gold. This is our flagship district. And really in this camp, we wanted to position ourselves with a number of district scale projects. And ultimately, because we were seeing a very large abundance of high grade gold at surface associated with these shear zones. The Lewiston and Golden Buffalo assets, these are our two primary assets here that we are the most developed. We acquired Golden Buffalo last year and since have done the systematic work we needed to get our drill targets developed and permitted. And in addition, we've got the Lewiston asset, which we've done a significant amount of systematic work and generated a number of high quality targets. Throughout this district, again, we've got these assays kind of ranging from the quarter gram all the way up to 5 ounces plus. With abundance of visible gold, specifically out of this Golden Buffalo project, and surface gold here at the Lewiston project, where we have done the most work. So when we start to peel back the onion layers on the technical criteria and how that correlates to an Abitibi style deposit, we take a look at some of the known deposits in the Abitibi gold belt. Specifically here, we're looking at two examples, one that's a 10 million plus ounce deposit and one that's a 4.5 plus million ounce deposit along those Abitibi belts. And we start to see that we not only do we have the right age of mineralization, we have very high grade gold at surface, we have the right host lithologies. In our case, we're lucky enough that our host lithology in this district is called the Miner's Delight, which is I think very telling for what it is. Ultimately, too, we see the exact same type of mineralization style, these stockwork veins associated in these shear zones. And the mineralogy and vector element geochemistry matches up very nicely to what we would expect out of these deposits from the Abitibi, really helping to continue to support this thesis. And in addition to that, the structural architecture and preparation for these very deep, large-scale systems is there. And to kind of get into that just a little bit more, I had mentioned earlier when we were talking about our technical advisors, Dean Peterson. Dean actually did his PhD in the Abitibi belt, specifically these three camps, Timmins, Kirkland Lake, and Hemlo Gold Camp, which at the time of his PhD in the 90s had produced about 110 million ounces of gold. Now, his research was pretty incredible in that two major factors were basically identified through his work as the primary controls of gold mineralization throughout these camps. And not only was it narrowed to these two factors, it was narrowed to those two factors with over 98% confidence, which if you're a scientist, you really understand how rare that is. And ultimately what his work identified was 99% of all this gold that was produced out of these districts was found within a 6 to 7 kilometer buffer of the major, so your primary structures, your Duster Porcupine Fault, for example. And in addition to that, almost all of the gold was specifically 98.86%, about 106 million ounces of this was found specifically in Rydell P shears. Now, for anyone who doesn't know what a Rydell P shear is, because I wouldn't expect most people to, ultimately, it's when we have these major suture zones, we have ancillary structures that form off of those suture zones, and that's actually where our gold deposits occur. And those structures those shear zones that come off of the major primary structure are measured at an obliqueness angle to the primary shear. And based on that, they get classified as a Rydell P shear or a Rydell R shear. So again, the vast majority of the gold in these Abitibi belts was specifically in these P shear structures, not the R shear structures. So again, within 6 to 7 kilometers of your major suture zone where you have P shear structures was where 98.86% of all this gold was found. How do we apply these incredible insights and our understandings to our project out here in the South Pass camp? Ultimately, when we look at this district, these black lines that you see here are our major bounding faults. These are our large-scale suture zones, and that's very strongly evidenced by your stark shift in geology, your greenstone on either side. Now, the blue in here, this is that Miner's Delight formation. So our meta-graywacke, this is our favorable host rock for scrubbing out the potential gold that's coming up in fluids. And so the lighter grayish line here is the outline of our 4 district scale properties. And then this dashed red line is a 7-kilometer buffer to those primary suture zones. So very quickly, you can see that we've tied up the vast majority of opportunity of scale throughout this entire camp, which is really exciting. And in addition to that, you know, we've been able to continue to get out and put our boots on the ground, doing our systematic exploration work. We actually had Dean out there working with our geologic team to map all summer, and he was continually able to map in where we see our surface gold mineralization being associated specifically with these Rydell P shears. So again, just another way that we continue to confirm our thesis of this Abitibi-like opportunity, and it just continues to get more and more exciting. So that's the thesis. That's the big picture look at things. You know, Peter had mentioned that we tend to look at things at a very large scale, and you know, building off of kind of their earlier model, and it works. The idea is that we are looking at these massive system scales, and it's really important that we understand these systems so that we can move into the next layer of focus on that property scale. And so that's what we're going to do now. We're going to look at the Lewiston asset first. This is again one of our flagship assets, and it's an orogenic shear hosted gold district. So when we take a look, we've got this very large land package, just under 14,000 acres of ground, including 58 acres of patented ground. Our surface rock chip programs have again returned up to 2 ounces per ton at surface here, as well as some localized copper. And we do have an abundance of shear zones along a 10-kilometer strike length of this shear zone corridor, where we've got stacked kind of P shears, and our mineralization seemingly associated directly with that. In addition to that, we've worked hard to get these targets permitted, and so we do have multiple permits on hand to begin testing this large scale opportunity. Within this property package, we have 4 historic mines. They're the most prolific mines in the district on record. Now, that said, there is not a ton of historic records. There was no known resources or production records that we could find to date, but there were references of depths of shafts and drifts and ore grades. The Hidden Hand mine, that is actually the patented ground that we do have. That was the most prolific mine in the district. It mined down to about 110 feet and drifted in about 640 feet in either direction. Those historic reports, again, they reference, you know, 75 ounces per ton coming out of the 30-foot level, and, you know, some ore shoots as rich as exceeding 3,000 ounces per ton. So ultimately, this specimen style visible gold, which we used to think would be exciting to see, and once we now have seen it, it continues to get more and more exciting. So again, all of these were orogenic shear hosted deposits. It's very obvious when you get, and you can see the nice cross section of their shafts, and how they chase these veins. And ultimately, they all kind of stopped mining in the early 1900s. And you can see a common trend. Ultimately, when they started to intersect water, and they didn't have a way to deal with that at the time. And they moved on to greener pastures, which was out to the west, over towards the CAUTIONARY mine, where some of our other project assets reside. So when we take a look at the Lewiston project, again, we're looking at these near vertical shear zone corridors. These, as we would expect in the Abitibi, can go upwards of multiple kilometers of depth. So one of the things is it's important to have an idea of what's going on with the structural architecture of the system, but it's equally important to know where you might be in that system. Now, that can be very telling just from rock geochemistry. And what our rock geochemistry is telling us is that we're potentially in the apex of a system rather than in the roots of a system. So when you look at these types of orogenic deposit chemistry, again, is going to tell you, are you the upper part of the system, or are you down in the lower part of the system, i.e. is the opportunity at depth, or has it been eroded away? And so again, all the geochemistry that we see associated with these steeply dipping shear zone systems is that we're in the apex of a potential system. So with our systematic exploration work, we've developed now 5 major drill target regions. These are the mines that we are looking at, and that table before, comparing the technical aspects to some Abitibi deposits. These are their deposit footprints to scale of the actual ore zone. And it's really just to show you and continue to reiterate the size of these projects and the opportunities. You can ultimately fit these district scale plays into any one of our drill targets. So ultimately teeing this property up for a pipeline of opportunities to test. And so again, we're excited about that. Now, we currently have permits in hand on targets 1 and 2 here in the northern section, and permit in the hidden hand here is pending, and we're expecting it in the next couple months. So again, Brian and I being trained by majors, but also operating in the private sector and having a constant need to create step change value, but also understanding how to mitigate risk. We really are compelled to do things like early stage metallurgical analysis. It's very important to know, how is this gold occurring? We know that we have high grade gold at surface. We know that it's associated with orogenic shear zone style deposit. But how is it occurring? Is it refractory gold? Is it long-term? Are there going to be issues, or is it free gold? Is there an opportunity to process this with an easier method in the future? Should a deposit be found? So again, we did this very early stage work. We do it on all of our projects, and we were able to identify that our system is dominated by free gold. And you know, that makes sense considering most of the historic mining was your typical stamp mill and gravity operations, and they were able to produce the vast majority of the gold via those methods. So ultimately, in this kind of northern area, again, we've got these 2 major drill target zones here that we're looking at. We've got high grade gold at surface up to 2 ounces per ton, and that gold seems to be dominated by free gold. So this is one of our flagship drilling permits that we've got ready and teed up to begin testing things at depth. So now we're going to talk about the Golden Buffalo project. And the Golden Buffalo project is an extremely high grade shear zone. And you know, while we're on this slide, I think it's important to just take a time, look at, this is a picture from our, one of our properties from the Golden Buffalo, and you can see how unassuming the ground is out there, right? These little knobs are actually stacked sheared rock that's poking out through the surface. The vast majority of the surface is covered with a thin volcanic ash soil layer. So, 125 years of aeolian erosion. We get up to 90-mile-an-hour winds out here. So you can imagine that a lot of this rock might not have been exposed as well in the early 1900s and the late 1800s, when a lot of the prospecting was happening during this district, which I think is one of the key points to consider when we look at why is there so much high-grade gold at surface and how come it hasn't been discovered in the past. It may just be as simple as that it was still covered by this soil cover. So the Golden Buffalo project, again, when I say high-grade gold at surface, this is some abundant coarse gold at surface. You can see in the picture here. This was historically mined, but when I say historically, it was mined in 2020 by a previous small operator on a small section within the property package that now owns. And they were able, through their small mining operation and some metal detecting, to produce nearly 500 ounces of gold through about a 20-meter trench. And you can see that trench over here on the far right. It's about a bucket scoop wide, right in the hard rock. You can see the gold. It's actually in the hard rock and in the vein system. And you can see how sheared and altered it is. And again, this is what we're looking at there. This is your outcrop. So, they found this site via metal detecting and ended up going out and mining with just that Traco. And then we have since partnered with them on their asset and developed a much larger property package accordingly. One of the key things about Buffalo is really important to us, outside of the shiny, that's always exciting. It's always great to see coarse visible gold at surface, but really was the operators themselves. They're very, very, very important community members who have a strong connection to the community, but also have a lot of care and desire in seeing mining development projects happen out there. And so we were really excited to partner with them on their property specifically, but also to fold them into our group so that we can work with them and have them help advise us on our community relationships, but also continue to be a part of this exciting surface discovery that they had made. So this is where their historic mining operation was along these stacked shear zones that we have since mapped in through our detailed systematic mapping programs. And again, our rock chip assays out of here have confirmed what we see with our eyes in that exceeding 5 ounces per ton gold. So really exciting project, very large scale. Right now, we've got an immediate permit in the mine area, and we'll have in the next couple of months an expanded permit for drilling here. I think we've got 34 pads that will be permitted across 4 major targets on this Golden Buffalo project. So very exciting. We're really excited to get out there and start drilling this third dimension. And one of the beauties is this is really open in all directions. And there seems to be these stacked shear zone systems as our geophysics and our soil geochemistry is starting to really paint a picture of. So a lot of opportunities to continue to expand on our systematic exploration and continue to generate more and more targets throughout this site. And again, this is, again, the beautiful, the visible gold that came out of that surface operation. And we're excited to hopefully continue to see more. So moving on now to the western side of the South Pass camp, we're looking at our SHIELD-CARISSA project, again in the high-grade Carissa gold trend. So this project butts up to the Carissa mine, which was the most prolific producer in the region. It on record produced about 180,000 ounces during its tenure, and it ended in the highest grade ore zones. So this is now actually a state historic site. So you can tour that mine anytime you'd like. And we've developed a very great relationship with all of the folks there. They've shared a bunch of mine data with us, which shows the assays in the base level of the mine as some of the highest grades. So again, seemingly leaving this opportunity untested to the true deep depths that it may illustrate. Taking a look at this, and we've got over a 5-kilometer shear zone corridor strike length with multiple P shears mapped throughout and high-grade gold associated. This is the Carissa mine over here. So again, our property boundary butts right up to it. In addition to that, we have 2 other historic mines. We have the B&H mine and the Shields mine. Both do not have any historic production rates similar to what we had in Lewiston. They were very similar high-grade orogenic targets, and since have been decommissioned. Ultimately, again, this is one of our next projects to continue to do some systematic exploration work on in the 2022 year and really generate drill targets for this property so that we can move them into the permitting phase and continue to generate a pipeline of potential discovery opportunities throughout our portfolio. So Bradley Peak, we are now going to be moving to the Bradley Peak Greenstone Belt. So we're now shifting from, we were in the South Pass camp here off in the west. Now we're moving along our Oregon Trail structural belt to our Bradley Peak project here over in the east. Again, this is another, just purely generative target that the data had basically pointed us to originally go to based on the criteria for potential of hosting an orogenic gold opportunity. And once we really put our boots on the ground there, again, the excitement grew because we had the right structural setting. We can identify that we're in this brittle ductile transition zone and that we have these major P shears coming off of large suture zone. In addition to that, we have the right types of lithology to scrub potential mineralization, as well as some other geochemical traps. The alteration that we'd expect to see with some pretty large halos, chlorate and carbonate and silica. And again, the geochemical pathfinders that we'd be looking for to vector towards a potential Abitibi-like opportunity. So again, under that idea, we went out and really started to expand this land package and build a substantial district scale opportunity here. This is a look at the shear zone on the property. This is just one of the shear zones to give you an idea. You can see the abundant quartz veining here and throughout. This is actually where this sample came from at 6.5 grams per ton gold and 3.7% copper. So we do have a higher influx of copper here on this project. So we are seeming it to look at more of a BMS style deposit here. So it might be more of an analog to something like the Horn deposit that we see in the Abitibi belts. Ultimately, again, very large property package, over 5,600 acres and over a 5-kilometer shear zone corridor. So here, giving you that perspective, one large contiguous package. There's one historic mine there called the Hidden Treasure Mine. There was a couple other little small ones off of that. This was described as the most prolific, although it did not get into too much detail outside of some historic assays on production and things of that nature. But again, we've got a very large Archean block of rock here. This is a much more traditional greenstone style target. We have that classic metamorphic shear terrain, refolded folds, floating fold hinges, and shear zone dominated structural corridors. We're typically seeing our mineralization again associated with these shear zone corridors and intersecting structures where we have a rheologic contrast, creating some traps for mineralization. And again, never really explored with modern technique and never drilled. So with that, it brings us into our closing. Ultimately, Relevant Gold, we're really excited. We're focused on this new eyes on old rocks approach. We've generated this Abitibi extensional thesis from many, many years of work of putting the science, the literature, and the data together. And doing so, we've generated these very large district scale orogenic gold projects. And we are developing them through the exploration pipeline with our passionate leadership team. Obviously, we're really proud of our team, and we've got a lot of depth of experience in taking things through the discovery process and beyond. Right now, we've got our 2 district scale assets, the Lewiston and Golden Buffalo, that we're moving into the drilling phases, both very high grade gold at surface, both have a lot of multiple drill targets ready to test and permitted. And in addition to that, we're continuing our systematic exploration work to develop a pipeline of discovery opportunities that continue to fit this Abitibi-like model. And all of this is being done in Wyoming. Again, a really great place to operate. As I mentioned earlier, it has recently become the second most favorable mining policies globally on the Policy Perception Index from the Fraser Institute report. So as we look forward into 2022, we're really focused on basically getting into our drilling as well as getting listed. We are looking to eventually list on a recognized exchange in Canada, and so we're moving quickly to that. And ultimately working on commencing our drilling as well at Golden Buffalo and Lewiston, and continuing to permit a number of these targets. As I mentioned earlier, some are already in the queue and nearing completion. By the time we get to the summer, we should have 4 to 5 permits in hand to have optionality ultimately in testing these high-grade targets. In addition to that, we'll be focused on continuing to develop our understanding of the structural architecture in these systems through our systematic exploration, and doing so, generating new opportunities to test at depth, and continuing to get out and do our reconnaissance work and visiting some areas of interest where we may consider new acquisitions and expanding that project portfolio of opportunity. And really focused on that pipeline of opportunities. And again, doing this all with the goal of making new discovery. That's what we're focused on. We're very passionate about science, geology, and discovery, as well as business. And we really see Relevant Gold as a great opportunity for us to prove up a thesis and ideally move towards making some new discoveries. And so with that, I'd say join us for the big discovery. We're really excited to be able to share this with everybody today. Again, I want to thank everyone who's taken the time to join in here today. There is contact information here at the bottom for Chris Jensen. He can direct you on any questions you might have, and can direct you to myself and Brian for questions as well. And happy to dig in more. I know we're not going to have too many questions necessarily to be able to answer here with the limited time we have left, but we will, at this point, be able to open it up for some questions. So thanks, everybody. Thank you for joining us. And yeah, we look forward to the future.